So what Kathy read for us just a few moments ago was the story of the ascension. And in that story, we sort of remember that Jesus' mission had been accomplished. And in that story, the baton is now just about to be handed off to his closest followers to carry on that mission here on earth. And having been in the presence of Jesus as he taught, as he performed miracles, as he stood up to resistance, as he welcomed other people in radical ways, that had to have been kind of a surreal experience for those disciples. Perhaps could have even gotten to their head that they were allowed to be so close to Jesus so often. I'm sure at times as they walked around there, they probably could have held up their chest a little high and felt really good about themselves as people sort of clamored to be close to them and close to Jesus. They were a part of this grassroots religious movement that was really catching a lot of steam. And it had to have been wonderful. But all of a sudden, now Jesus is leaving. The disciples who had been there from the beginning probably still didn't get everything. They probably still understood so little about Jesus' ministry and the ways of the kingdom. And all of a sudden, now they're going to be looked upon to lead. The expectations would have been high, and disappointment certainly was around the corner if they were trying to follow in Jesus' footsteps on their own power. So what are they to do? And one thing to remember is Luke was the writer of the Gospel of Luke and also the book of Acts. And he makes it very, very clear that they need to rely and draw their power from God, not from their own personal resources. The church and Jesus' mission could only succeed without him being physically present if it in fact was empowered by the Spirit of God. So Jesus instructed his followers, "Wait in Jerusalem till you are clothed with power from on high." Until you are clothed with power that is not your own personal strength, but something that comes beyond you. There was a story once about a young boy who was hired to do odd jobs and help around this dry ice packing plant. And as they were working one day, the plant foreman lost his watch in the piles of sawdust that they sort of packed this dry ice in. And he had this entire crew stop their work to help him find the watch. And the watch apparently was very, very valuable, and it certainly, even more important, had a lot of sentimental value. I have no idea who gave it to him, but it really mattered to him. This whole crew gathered in looking for this watch. He desperately wanted to find it, and eventually they just gave up. Couldn't find it anywhere, and they went to lunch. And when the crew and their foreman returned for lunch, they found this young boy standing in the front of the plant holding the watch. And the guy obviously was pretty excited. He said, "How in the world did you find that watch? We had this whole crew looking at it for at least an hour, and here you have it." And the boy said simply, "You guys went away. You went to lunch. It was quiet in here. I got down and laid down on the ground in the sawdust, and I just listened for the sound of a ticking watch, and I heard it off in the distance." In this age, we are not very good at doing things like that. How often do you and I lie still and quiet and listen for the sound of God's voice? How often in the midst of this busy life do we simply pause and pray and ask God, "God, please give me the direction. Give me some new insight. Tell me what I should be doing." How often do we pause and do what that young boy did, just sat there and listened? A secret of the early church's growth was they began by this waiting. They paused in prayer and were waiting for God to empower them and lead them. Their effectiveness really was the result of that waiting first, relying on God before they actually went out in action in the world. Being willing to rely on God was important because God indeed had big plans for them. He had a big purpose for them. The disciples, were told, once Jesus left, they were told what they were to do in the meantime while they awaited for him to return. And in a sense, what we're continuing to do, we're not to pass time idly by just entertaining ourselves or doing whatever we want or living for ourselves. We're told, like the first church was, we are called to be witnesses. And their call in the early church was to spread the good news of Jesus and how he had transformed their life. Christians, we carry out that message that Jesus is alive and accessible to us. That's what they were trying to say to others. And a witness quite simply is someone who is willing to step forward and speak from their personal experience. They're not speaking about something that just someone has told them secondhand. They speak from the heart about how this message has impacted them first and foremost. It's interesting to note when you read the Greek, the word for witness is also the same word for martyr. So a witness really is someone who displays a commitment they're willing to sacrifice in order to make sure that message is known in the world. Doesn't have to necessarily die for that message, although certainly people in Christian history have. A witness is someone who just takes that message so seriously that they have to get that message out to other people. Our direction, like the early church in Acts 1, they're told, you are to be witnesses in Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, to the ends of the earth. And what that says really for us is that we must be willing to stretch ourselves beyond just the people we know. It means we're to stretch beyond our comfort zone and possibly at times even reach out in directions we never thought possible. There was a young woman once who traveled to Guatemala with a mission as part of a mission trip. And mission trips are wonderful things. And they were from the United States, and we're going to spend 2 weeks in Guatemala. And the first 2 days of this mission trip were kind of acclimation and teaching you about the ins and outs and giving some sage advice. And as part of this time, the group was told, you're going to encounter street children in Guatemala City. And they were told, just ignore these children. Okay, they were told they're going to be begging, and do not give them money. They were told these are con artists who will never learn self-respect or sufficiency if rich Americans are just continually handing out money to them. And then they said the bold thing that you even hear people say here in the United States, if you give them money, they're going to go out quickly and buy alcohol and drugs. We've all heard that before. And the group had actually encountered street children on the way from the airport to their hotel. And this woman who's hearing this had actually given money to some of these street kids. And she had raised her hand and took issue. And she said, we came here in the name of Christ to convey the love of Christ. How can we be expected to ignore children on the street? And the leader kind of came back and said, just don't do it. And she just kind of let it, she didn't do anything more that day. But the next morning, she went down to the hotel bakery. She literally bought every piece of bread that she could find. And each time she left the hotel, she would just simply carry that bread with her. And whenever she saw a kid on the street, she would just basically lovingly hand them a piece of bread. And she was just so determined she was going to share the love of Christ in whatever way possible with every kid she met along the way. And she did that for the 12 remaining days in Guatemala City. In fact, it got to the point about halfway through the trip that the kids began waiting outside the hotel for what they began to refer to as mujer de pan, which in Spanish means bread lady. Bread lady. And whatever else you and I do as part of Christ Church, in every generation we are called to be faithful witnesses. We're called to faithfully show others the love of Christ, and we must faithfully tell the story of how Jesus has changed our life and how that can change other people's lives. And ultimately, it's a creative task for every single one of us. This young lady had her creative way of sharing it, but every single person in this room, when we really think about it and we recognize it's our job to do that, we'll find our own way to convey that, and we must do that. You know, the early church, they considered, in every generation, we have sort of viewed this text as a key to our renewal. We're reminded once more that the world doesn't change if we rely on our own strength. The world changes when we wait for the Spirit to work in our life, when we recognize we absolutely need God, and God is the one who will guide us and help us, give us purpose. And we must faithfully witness until the Lord's return, whenever that may be. It may be in our lifetime, it may be well after our lifetime, but until that day, we just simply share the love of Christ. You know, if we desire to have an effective and growing church, and I think that's what we do here, we have to rely on the power of God. And we must pray for that. If we think it's all about us, our own strength, our own gifts, we won't get very far. But if we say to God, God, use us in whatever way you can, lead us and guide us in whatever direction you may take us, I think we'll receive great blessings and be a great blessing in this community. Amen.